Hello, everyone. So today we're going to talk about federalism and what exactly it is. So, what exactly is it? So, federalism is the system of government in which power is divided up between the national and regional governments. The regional governments can include state and local city and county governments as well. This system of government allows for local issues to be resolved at a state level. That way, the national government or the national laws don't have to be in place for every single area of the country. The framers recognized that too strong of a central government could threaten individual liberties, so that's why they decided to give states some power as well in terms of creating laws. But they also needed to restrain the power of the central government over the states, and we will see how they do that towards the end of the slide. So there are several different types of powers that the national government is granted via the Constitution. Those types of powers are known as delegated powers. And of the delegated powers, there are three different types of defined powers. The first are express powers. These are clearly spelled out in the Constitution. These are, for example, like collecting taxes, minting coins, declaring war. These are all written out specifically in the Constitution or has specific articles and sections and clauses. The second type of power are implied powers. These aren't expressly stated in the Constitution word by word, but they are suggested. This is due to because the Constitution grants the necessary and proper clause in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. So the article or the Constitution basically gives the federal government these sorts of powers that they seem necessary. So, for example, some of these can be building the interstate highway system or the regulation of hydroelectric dams. The government, the federal government for that matter, or the national government needs to have these powers. And it's allowed to have these certain powers thanks to the necessary and proper clause. And then finally, the inherent powers. These are powers that are not written strictly in the Constitution, but have been historically granted to the national government, to any sovereign country. So, for example, regulating immigration, when a new country acquires territory, protecting the government from a coup from within the nation itself. These powers aren't expressly written in the Constitution, but they've always been there for any type of government. Now, when it comes to state powers, these are powers that are not granted, or more specifically, these are powers that the Constitution does not grant to the national government and does not deny the states from executing these. An example of these reserved powers is, for example, parental consent for people under 18 to marry and the legal drinking age of 21. The states are allowed to make these type of laws depending on a state-by-state basis. Now, as well, there are also types of powers known as exclusive powers that are only given to the national government. These are such as raising an army and conducting foreign relations. These are only available to the national government. But there are also powers that both the national and the local government can share. These are called concurrent powers. Some of these powers include levying taxes. We have here in California, for example, we have sales tax, and we also have income tax at the federal level. Every single state as well can create laws that define what a crime is and how they are punished. So a law here in California may be a little bit different from what it is in Texas, and it's allowed to do so. And finally, we're going to talk about the Supremacy Clause. So the Supremacy Clause, as we talked about past couple of days ago in the Constitution, basically says that the federal government, at the end of the day, reigns supreme over everything else in the land. The framers anticipated this issue would arise between national and state governments, and for that reason, they put it into the Constitution. One of the first examples of the Supremacy Clause coming into play occurred between McClellan and Maryland during the early 1800s. Just to give you a little bit of a background in terms of McCulloch versus Maryland. So McCulloch was a bank teller working in a bank in Baltimore, Maryland for the national government. He was basically working for the Second National Bank of the United States, which is a federally owned bank. The state of Maryland didn't like that, so they decided to input taxes on the second bank there in Baltimore. Now, when the state of Maryland came to the bank to collect these taxes, McCulloch, the bank teller, refused to pay those taxes. So in doing so, the government of Maryland arrested him, tried him, and found him guilty. When this case went up to the Supreme Court reversed Maryland's court decision, stating that the Constitution allows the national government certain powers in which states cannot impede, meaning that the state government cannot overstep their boundaries when it comes to the national government's power or entities. So because the Second Bank of the United States was federally owned and operated, state governments cannot interfere with those operations. So this is one of the prime examples of how the Supremacy Clause comes into play. And this issue between states and the federal government continues to this day. For example, when we deal with the marijuana issue, the state of California, the state of Colorado, for example, say that marijuana is legal, but the federal government says no. So we always going to have these issues between the state and the federal government.